Hi YouTube, Darth here. This is Over Your Shoulder, a series where I follow unsuspecting players and give unsolicited advice. Today's victim is Tankmayvin, a level 127 with some serious time and stats in the tank. I wanted to give you folks an episode where the primary focus was a top-end player for one thing. Tankmayvin is in the top 1% of players for kills in the main battle tanks, so hopefully we'll all learn a little bit of something today. Today I'll follow Tankmayvin and I'll try to give my best insights into how they play and what I might do differently. So let's look over Tankmayvin's shoulder. Unsurprisingly, Tankmayvin is in a tank. He's got the sabot shell, the canister shell, not something you see all the time, an autoloader, and a smoke screen, very interestingly, and zoom optics, which is a pretty much great choice on these long-range maps. So sabot, zoom optics, you're going to be sniping tanks is pretty much your role. Now, I'm really curious to see what he does with the smoke screen because APS is pretty much a go-to for every top tanker, although I expect Tankmayvin really knows his stuff because he's got so much time in tanks and so many kills. So it's really going to be up to him to prove me that smokescreen is actually useful. And Tankmayvin's running engineer, which makes sense for a tank. Anyway, we're approaching this Bravo point, and it looks like the team's going to capture it for us. There's a couple enemies up there at Delta, so let's see what Tankmayvin comes up with here. My personal preference would probably be to just peek this little corner here and see if the enemy tanks are going to show themselves. Good use of cover here as he sees these two tanks on his minimap and his HUD. Tankmayvin gets a nice quick shot in there and backs off so he prevents any further damage from being taken. But it looks like his opponent's going YOLO and just charging in. Hasn't managed to take any damage yet, finally gets it around in from the enemy tank, and I just don't think it saw him at all. Speaking of not seeing people at all, here's an enemy engineer that is completely ignored and knifes his repair guy. Mayvin gets some quick vengeance there. I think I might have just chosen to run him over. Looks like he's being torn up a bit by the AA gun, probably back towards their spawn. Still pillaring quite nicely against that tank. That tank seems a little bit clueless that he was here the whole time, otherwise he might have helped out his buddy. Let's see what our tabletop looks like briefly. It looks like the Russian team is already in trouble. They've lost Charlie, but they hold Delta. They don't have a commander, so Delta really isn't going to come into play here. Looks like Tank is trying to take care of business here around Charlie. Probably saw that there were some enemies over there. Doing a good job of keeping his eyes in this direction since that's the most likely vector that enemy's going to be coming from. And if you can't tell by now, there's a reason why this guy went 60-3 in the last round. Tankmayvin is being really aggressive with his tank, spotting enemies well on the minimap, taking care of them. He sees the guy from earlier there, kills him. That engineer puts a rocket into him, which is just not going to be enough. And you see that canister shell just destroying infantry at close range. So far, making this loadout work for him pretty well. I'm still curious to see if that smokescreen comes into play, though. Might be heading to Charlie finally, or he might just be standing off and waiting for a little bit of infantry support. It looks like he does have a little bit on there. There's at least two friendlies there. But he just keeps on trucking, noticing that Alpha is blinking. Good catch on his part. Sounds like we got a helicopter trying to be a nuisance to Tankmayvin. Oh, enemy about to get... Oh, so very lucky. Takes himself out. Not a problem anymore. So at this point we see that Alpha has actually stopped capturing, which tells me the enemy has left the area. The capture area is actually pretty big for A, and it looks like Tankmayvin's blasting all the possible cover locations that they could be in. If you check that minimap, it looks like there's a mine there that wasn't there before, so it's a pretty good guess that there's an enemy that dropped it. And of course, once you see that, then you can drop that enemy. So taking a look at the overall strategic situation, it looks like the Americans are still in charge of 3 out of 5 points, and the Russians are still limited to the eastern side of the map. If the US team can keep the Russians out of A and plug up Echo, then it's probably a good bet that they'll win the map. Kind of making a beeline towards Bravo here, but at the same time there's enough undulating, rolling hills that there's enough cover to hide behind if they suddenly take notice of you and you can hide. Especially on these second assault maps, which tend to have really long sight lines, I like to try and pick off armor from range, and I don't think he's really made a great use of that perk that he has so far, but he's definitely making great use of the canister shell. Tankmayvin might just sell me on the canister shell for a little while here if he continues to do well with it. Great shot on that tank there. Managed to come up with a little bit of soldier reactive armor. And normally this 2-on-1 situation would be a little bit scary for me. However, Tankmayvin comes up with the kill because he's got engineer support and the other tanks are completely out of position. And I think right now he's scratching his head as to where that other tank went, but we just clearly heard it explode. So while Tankmayvin repositions, let me talk a little bit about that autoloader. It's going to help you in any tank-on-tank combat situation. Generally, that autoloader gives you one more shot in on your enemy before he can get another shot on you. My personal favorite is HE autoloader, but it also works pretty well with AP. And as you can see here, Tankmayvin is being very meticulous about rooting out all the enemies that were at Bravo. He saw one guy over here and he had seen the other tank and he was looking carefully for both of them just to make sure that no surprises crop up here. If you notice the same names cropping up at the same point over and over, dying to you or dying to your teammates, it's not a bad idea to look and see if they have a spawn beacon down. So far some pretty aggressive play by Tankmayvin. He's been all over the map and he's 8-0 currently, so he's doing a fantastic job. Let's see if these mines manage to catch him though. Kind of curious if those go off or if they're below the ground. Yep, they're below the ground and they still went off, so that's kind of interesting. Pops the smoke, I guess, for his repair guy to get a little bit of cover. Comes up with that shot. Does he get the kill for it? Doesn't look like it, just the disable. That's the beauty of the Sabot shell when it comes to anti-aircraft. It's just point and click. It's one of the things I miss from my switch to HE rounds. It takes that from his fellow tanker. And are we going to make a push for Delta finally? No, it's going to stick towards Charlie. I'm not a big fan of going up to Delta actually in armor on this map unless I have some kind of proximity scan, because there's just so many angles that defenders can spawn from and then just have C4 on top of you immediately. If you don't have a whole lot of infantry support, it's really not a good idea. And then supported tank can very easily get ambushed. And again, it looks like the Russians have managed to capture Alpha. They might have a spawn beacon back here somewhere with as frequent as they're capturing it. Because they really haven't controlled the other points on the map that would sort of bring them here. I think for Alpha, rather than getting on top of it, since the capture point is so large, I might stay out in the road where infantry sort of have to expose themselves to my fire. Because otherwise you have to do all this kind of hunting and it opens you up to those kinds of opportunities. And if you have a squad or more working in tandem like this one is, it can become very difficult to not get dead, especially if you have aircraft locking onto you as well. So, Tankmayvin, not in the tank for the first time this evening. Good job of bursting. Let's do a quick check here once we're out of the action, what he has. Looks like the PDW. It's a PDWR, and he's got a heavy barrel, interestingly enough, on it. A tack light and a Cobra. Again, interesting loadouts. I've actually not used enough of the PDW to say if that's an interesting loadout or not for the heavy barrel. I'll just have to see how he does with this. And jumping a lot into the fire. It's one of those things that's a little bit difficult to see on this map. I kind of wish that they had a separate indicator for when you were taking burn damage as opposed to when you were taking bullet damage. Because there have been more than a few times on Metro and other second assault maps where I've turned around and been like, who's shooting me? And now he's in real trouble because the enemy knows where he is, although he has a teammate on the job, so he might be okay here. A teammate manages to distract the enemy long enough for him to come up with his kill, and doesn't see that guy in his mini-map and gets taken out. So again, on foot with the PDW. I'm not sure about the PDW as a choice of sidearm on this map, but I suppose if he's mostly going to be tanking, that might be okay. Just to hop out and try to kill enemies that are close by. Otherwise, I think I mentioned this in a previous over-your-shoulder where a carbine like the AK-5C or some other long-range weapon like a DMR might be your better choice on this map. So far, the PDW not a bad candidate for how he's making it work. And glancing over my shoulder at the Simthic stats for this weapon, it's not the worst weapon in the world for long-range combat. So you could make it work for you, but at the same time, I think there's much better choices in the carbines. So Tankmayvin's coming here to Echo. It probably is not a bad choice at this point in the round. You can probably try to choke off some of the Russian reinforcements to the rest of the map. And it looks like there's a tank here, so let's see if we can manage to grab it before the enemy team does. Looks like his squad mate could possibly, or not squad mate, his teammate could possibly also on the job. Oh, it is a squad mate. And, easy kill for somebody. That would have been his had that not exploded, surprisingly, beforehand. Let's take a look at what the tabletop situation is looking like, because it's not looking good for the Russians right now at all. And the Russians have held on to Delta for quite some time, but it's really not doing them any favors right now. They really need to focus up on getting 3 points. And while Delta is a good point to have on this map, it becomes a great point if you can have that commander and get that AC-130 up, because it has a reach on the whole map. And I think Tankmayvin popped his smoke there because of a fat finger, because I can't figure out any other reason why he would have. Looks like we're tracking down the infantry here at Charlie. I wonder if we're actually going to get on the point this time, or we're just going to sort of circle around the outside. Been kind of interesting the times at which he's chosen to go in on points with his tank and the times he's decided not to. So again, without infantry support, you might be in real trouble here at Charlie, simply because there are so many spawn points around the periphery of this, and you sort of are in a bucket. And surrounded tank in a bucket is usually a dead tank without any support. And paying attention to the minimap, we see that this enemy is over here and take him out with a single shot. The power of the canister shell right there. We also saw that there were a couple of skulls in that southwest area, so there's probably some enemies over there too. I think right here I would be a little bit cautious to get back to Charlie, because now you know that there are a few enemies there at least aware of you being here in the tank. And if they're in comms with each other, you might be in more trouble. Surprisingly, that canister shot doesn't kill that guy, so it's not a perfect anti-infantry weapon. So here's the reason I don't run canister shell, and I certainly love getting single shots like that. But here's the reason I don't run canister shell, and that's because you don't really get those follow-up shots like you might want with the MGs. If you miss, that's your shot, and if it's a C4 support, you're probably going to die. The other nice thing about machine guns versus using the canister shell is I can switch between machine guns and my normal tank rounds. So for example, while I wait for the tank round to reload, I can use the machine gun to kill any infantry that are nearby until I hear that reload sound. Very proactive use of the smoke to try and cover his retreats. Kind of an interesting play there. Again, a little bit more feedback on this layout. I'm not sure if I'm sold on smoke yet. Be kind of curious to take a look after I'm done with this and come up with for you what the actual numbers are for how fast the smoke screen reloads versus the AP. Paying a lot of attention to this helicopter, and seems like he should be coming up with these shots, just not managing to land these. I think he's tunnel visioning a little bit because he just got killed by a repair torch. Unsurprisingly, Tankmayvin's found his way back into a tank again. I think you'll notice a theme for this over your shoulder. And it looks like we are actually pretty tied up despite the Americans having controlled the flags for quite some time there. Looks like Russians have taken control of this map. We are currently looking at sort of this mid-cap situation with the Russians on A again. Again, if the Russians can hang on to A for any amount of time, they'll probably end up winning this map. But right now, it looks like we're going AA hunting. Obviously, I could say that there are no points out here, but at the same time, perhaps this thing is really annoying your team and it has to be dealt with. As I've been seeing Tankmayvin's perspective for the whole game, I can't really say if the AA has been punishing his team so heavily, but possibly in comms he has been warned by his teammates. Who knows? Ultimately, it seems like a long chase and kind of a waste for one kill. Obviously, the AA gun seems to be aware of him and is making a run for it. So good on the AA driver for at least being more aware than your typical AA driver. But now I think he's going to be in trouble as Maven is cresting this hill and has a couple of easy shots. That's going to be enough for a disable, and the kill should be coming shortly here. Looks like we're in a race to kill this with the teammate, and definitely should not have fired there as the enemy just got out. Provided that engineer had a repair torch, you could have just had both AA guns. So here's where the tank shotgun and the canister shell just do not work out well. At that long range where you start to see a lot more spread from those pellets. Battlefield 3 was actually a pretty good choice because they remained a tight cluster early on. I believe they patched that later, so it was kind of the spread it is now, and I don't think they changed it for Battlefield 4. Looks like we got a couple of lock-on threats. I'm guessing that this would be the aircraft on this map, and for this smokescreen, not a bad choice for as many lock-ons as you're going to have from the air, especially if your team is not good in the air. I might have been trying to line up a shot on that. So now Tankmayvin is kind of reaping what he sowed by going out in the middle of nowhere. He really doesn't have anywhere to hide from these airborne threats that are constantly harassing him, and he managed to take him out just like that. Back on the ground with Tankmayvin, I think if I were to change anything about his gameplay so far, I might be a little bit more aggressive towards certain points, especially if I know if there's infantry support on it. Right now, the Russians are kind of coming away with this game, and especially at Alpha and Bravo, which is points that they really shouldn't be in control of. I think I might have paid a little bit more attention to that earlier on. But for now, we seem to be at these points. We're only down by about 80 points right now, so these captures could easily still swing the game back in the American team's favor. Unlucky for J-Max there. Managed to be pointing in the wrong direction, although you probably don't expect a U.S. soldier from that side, and Tankmayvin manages to get a face full of lead. Tankmayvin back in the tank again. I want to say that he was probably a little bit too premature on trying to engage that tank. I probably would have waited for that tank to pass and then shoot him from behind rather than try to face off with it. But now that we're back in the tank, we can face off with it no problem. Thanks to the miracle of video editing, you're not seeing the minutes that Tankmayvin is spending waiting for his tank. One thing about waiting for assets like Tankmayvin has been, you tick away so many tickets that you could otherwise help your team to sort of recover. Like, for example, if he had spawned at any of those points, perhaps his team would have 3 out of 5 flags instead of 1 out of 5 right now. But currently trying to play the standoff game with this. There's no cover here particularly for armor, so I think it's kind of a dangerous game that he's playing. If that tank had been a little bit more aware and tried to spot this infantry and this tank coming towards him rather than spending so much time trying to kill the infantry on top of the wall, he probably would be in better shape. So in case you're wondering, the strength of the smoke screen, it prevents criticals from happening on your tank. So here's the trade-off he's making with that autoloader. By using the autoloader, he doesn't have reactive armor, which would normally reduce the number of criticals he has on his tank. By using the smoke instead, he still avoids getting those criticals. It's an interesting trade-off, but I still think APS is better. And Tankmayvin is definitely getting some big assists from his repair guys. A solid crew definitely makes for an amazingly powerful tank. So originally at this point in the match I was talking about conservation of ammo, but an interesting thing happens here where he goes from 1 in reserve to 4 in reserve all of a sudden. I really have no explanation for that. If somebody knows why that happened and can explain that in the comments, I would love to know myself. Despite that bugged out counter, the point I was trying to make is that when you blow all of your ammo as a tank on non-armored threats, you don't have any backup plan for when the armored threats arrive. Good job breaking the line of sight by just finding a tall structure and standing next to it with this tank. If you're ever getting locked on and you have something tall that you can put your tank next to, that's not a bad way of breaking any lock. Because even if you're in an aircraft, finding that tall mountain to just put yourself behind. Taking a couple of hits here from random engineers on the other side of this. Manages to help his teammate out there a little bit. That lock-on is again going to be a possible problem. Seems like his team is having a pretty terrible time in the air right now, and there's a nice long-range canister shot. It's definitely a good shot for catching infantry that are low if you land some or most of the pellets on them. But again, because it's like a shotgun, that pellet spread at range is significant. And again, I don't feel like it has the same long-range power like it did in Battlefield 3, though. I'd have to go to SimTick to get the actual numbers on that, but that's my general feeling, having played with it just a little bit. Good shot on that. Finally takes the hit from the air and is in real trouble here if his repair guys can't get him up in time and if that tank comes down, if either of these tanks spot him. Takes a hit from behind now, so we've got we got trouble all around. Definitely needs to get in the cover here. I don't know if that smokescreen is really helping him out a whole lot. Finally tracks down where all this punishment is coming from and is probably not going to manage to stop his inevitable death. Tankmayvin is back on the ground for some quick vengeance on these two tanks. The Sraw is not a bad choice on these long sightline maps because if your tank or target is moving, you have a little bit of adjustment ability with the Sraw, whereas even fast weapons like the Small might not catch up to the tank in time. Looks like this tank is about to get C4'd or something. Yep, easy pickings. Plenty of rounds left. Who's next? And that one is disabled and, ooh, surprisingly doesn't actually get killed. Somebody got in a really good disable on it before. They got out again. Uh-oh. This could be trouble. Well, this guy decides not to engage. Oh, he actually gets killed by Tankmayvin. Not bad. It can sometimes be a little bit hard to hit those passengers in the car simply because if you shoot it from the front or from behind, you're more going to hit bullets into the actual car itself than your target, which is always a little bit infuriating if you're trying to shoot somebody straight on and you're like, oh, why can't I hit this guy? Because you're actually hitting the car. I found that if you shoot it from the side, you have much better luck. And we're currently in the middle of nowhere. We're down by about 300 tickets, so this game is starting to slide away from the Americans having a chance of victory unless they pull out a couple of points here. If they manage to capture Bravo and Delta, they might be in good shape, but right now it's not looking good for them, especially with their star player sort of out in the middle of nowhere. That's another one of my gripes about this particular map, is just that you can get stranded so easily. Thinking back, it probably would have been a better idea for him to take that Jeep that he knocked that passenger out of. And then this forest turns into not a forest, which makes it really difficult to take later on in the map. Currently, he is doing a good job of trying to dodge all this fire, especially since Delta was shooting at him, and he does seem to have at least a couple of spawns here that were aware of him. I feel like there's another spawn still out there that had been looking at him. That tank is going to certainly help him out a bit. So here's a good thought process that should run through your mind whenever you're under fire. If there's a nearby vehicle, you should be jumping into it. At the very least, it buys you time, and if you're lucky, it has an open gunner spot like this, and it really gives you a chance to reverse the battle on your enemy. Tank did a really good job there as gunner of looking at all the spots that his tank driver was not. Still an enemy on Charlie. I'm kind of curious to see if they go back or if he gets out, but they decide to just press on at this point. At this point in time, I would probably be watching that back end, and they managed to get taken out from any number of directions. Tankmayvin gets tired of waiting for a tank and finally spawns at Echo. Looks like he's got a commander order that he's decided to ignore for now. I'm never usually a fan of commander orders. I usually accept them and reissue my orders just so the guy gets his ribbons if he needs them. You may have noticed that a little bit of time has passed since Tankmayvin's last update, and I did speed this up a little bit right here. Yeah, right now, let's say, so quick update here. Tankmayvin was probably waiting for a tank for about, I want to say 10 or so minutes. Oh, and he gets taken out by the chopper. Roadkill for the win. So as I was saying, Tankmayvin spent quite a bit of time actually waiting for a tank, and it's sort of cost his team the game so far. See a couple of Russians up here in this tower that we can take care of. Currently the Americans are slowly coming back in this game. They've held on to about 4 or 3 points for the last 10 or so minutes while we've been waiting for a tank. Does a good job here with hipfire and manages to take out those 2 enemies. Sounds like there's at least one more up here trying to use some kind of javelin. Perhaps he's just gotten taken out by their friendly tank. So, yeah, at this point in the game, as confused as this has sort of been, I definitely wouldn't have spent so much time waiting for a tank, even though your name is Tankmayvin. And we saw an enemy on the minimap here. It looks like we lost him and reacquired him, but didn't quite get the shot off. So back on foot, and looks like we're heading for Charlie. Again, I'd probably switch out that PDW, but if he's making it work for him and he's good with it, well, who am I to say that this is not a weapon for you, Tankmayvin? But personally, I would pick something that's a little more reliable at mid and long range. Again, AK-5C, DMR, some other weapon with a high bullet velocity or a better sense of range at long range. But Delta is one of those points where CQB actually works, so let's see how this goes. Looks like there's plenty of action to be had here on the minimap. Not visible though, so I'm guessing they're either on that back end or they're going to be below. I'd probably be doing at least a sweep from down here below, and it looks like Tankmayvin is half-heartedly thinking about it. C4 Jeep coming up here. It's got at least 1 extra guy in it. I think I might have taken a little bit more effort to try and take that out. Oh, this is just going to be fun. Oh, swerve at the end and sort of feel cheated when that happens. Oh, no, just not enough there. Back on the ground at Delta. Team's managed to come up with this. Doing a good job of pushing the enemy team off of this. Another good job of spotting the minimap. Always check your minimap. You never know what free kills you're going to get. We're chasing this one perhaps a bit too long. It sounds like the AC-130 is up by all the random explosions going on all around. Thankfully, there is no enemy commander, so you didn't have to worry about that for most of the round. And the American team is, again, only behind by about 180 points. Oh, and falls to his death. Running between Charlie and Delta exposed like that is a good recipe to die, because generally there's at least one person who's hanging back at either Charlie or Delta looking across the river waiting for free kills to come to it. I would be exceptionally worried about the same thing happening twice here, but he manages to see this guy on his minimap and kills him with like the last few bullets in his gun. Honestly, he should have gotten turned on and killed at that point. So next up we have Charlie on the menu. Looks like we have at least one enemy here. Definitely sees him on his minimap. His teammate took him out though, so no worries there. I'd probably try to get on the back end of this and make sure that no spawns come at that point. So we have a couple of bozos here that are just going mortar or going long range and not really paying attention to the situation that's become of them. Again, if you ever suspect that enemies are probably in a location, they probably are, especially if your own teammates aren't there on the map. It gets a little bit harder to predict with wider open maps like this, but there are general routes that people always run, and this team was sticking to them. Tankmayvin getting a lot of work done here at this point, simply by sticking to his guns and by sticking to using the minimap as a great source of knowledge about where the enemy team is and trying to locate them and kill them. Another great source of knowledge is bullet flash. Even if an enemy is not spotted, if you spot his flash, you can use that to just zero in on him and kill him. This is great for enemies that are in particularly thick cover. Looks like his commander is giving him a small present here. Gets a small present from his teammate there. Gets another present from his teammate who took a bullet for him. Another teammate that took a bullet for him. Getting pretty lucky here with his teammates taking all the pain for him. Oh, kit swap, yes! I'm so happy. Look at that, 52 revive, I'm less happy. But nevertheless, good intuition on kit swapping and taking his assault buddy's kit and rezzing him. Be sure to check out my video about kit swapping for more info on that. Situation still improving for the American side. If they capture A, they're going to be in much better shape than they were earlier on in this game, although there's a pretty concentrated Russian push here coming towards Charlie, and you have no equipment to deal with this. Yeah, paddles, not an option against tanks. FAMAS is kind of a really weird choice for this map. In fact, it's pretty much a terrible choice. I'm not a big fan of close quarter weapons on maps that are particularly wide open or large like this. Like, you can get away with this at Delta, but nowhere else on this map. If you can somehow get lucky and keep all your combat distances at less than 10 meters on this map, well, kudos to you. So a mistake that Maven is making here is just running along constantly with paddles. If an enemy showed up here, he'd probably be dead simply from the switch time. Let's take a look at his kit though. So it looks like we've got the FAMAS, a laser reflex, and no barrel attachment, so you still got a little bit of range here if you manage to control this weapon, but the Russian contingent finally takes him out. We're back with the Bulldog. Also a peculiar choice, kind of better at CQB. Scar H is not a bad choice for this map. I actually like that choice on this map. Manages to cut that guy close enough, but does not does not survive the kill from the enemy team. Kind of a risky revive there by his teammates. So let's switch back to Tankmayvin, who's just got a risky revive. You can make the Bulldog work at long range. I think you would want to have an angled grip for that kind of behavior. He seems to be fascinated with the fact that he has paddles, so I'm kind of curious to see where he goes with this. Trying to track down the enemy that keeps on killing him. Finally manages to catch him. The American team has managed to close this game to only 30 tickets after holding on to so many points for so long. I'm kind of curious to see what happened to the Russian team. Looks like they're clearing them out. They've held on to A, which is pretty much the only point they've held on to, so I'm guessing there's a squad or a couple of guys that are actually just committed to holding that for the team, and the rest of the team is just falling apart. So yeah, apologies for the length of this, but it looks like this game is going into overtime right now. Yeah, it looks like this game might actually swing into the Americans, unless the Russians happen to switch it up real quick. We have a comeback on our hands. Doing a good job of mashing Q and spotting the enemies for his teammates. Let's see if that tank manages to notice the enemies that are around him. This is again a situation where it might have been better to have a better long-range weapon, because you're really having to tap fire that thing to get value out of it. A little bit exposed here. I probably would have gone into the shelter nearby and not taken a rocket to the face. So it looks like we've switched up our choice of weapons again. AK-12, much better choice for this map. This is a long-range weapon, or at least it can be made to be a suitable long-range weapon because of its low rate of fire and its higher accuracy. Definitely an up-and-coming favorite of mine when I happen to pick it up from people that are using it other than me, because I tend to favor other weapons other than this. They just happen to be better at multitudes of ranges. Gives his little squad mate a teeny little revive. Does a good job ducking behind cover. Definitely lots of enemies here, so I think I would play it slowly. Trying to catch up with the squad mate over here. That guy gets picked off again in the open. Probably have stuck a little bit closer to the rocks. I'd be very suspicious that the enemy knows where I am, and watching the minimap you kind of saw that coming. So it looks like the Russian team has grabbed 3 points back, and the American team is currently fighting for A. Yeah, this is anybody's game at this point, so you guys are going to be just as interested in I to see how this plays out. Neutralized A. It looks like the enemy commander has actually shown up finally, so Delta is going to play a much bigger part in the Russians' hands now with that AC-130 up. If the Russians can manage to grab 3 points and hold on to them, this could quickly swing in their favor, simply because that AC-130 is going to be the great neutralizer to any American offensive. Going dune buggying right now, a little bit of trust in his squad mate here. If they manage to capture Echo without any pushback from the Russian team, they might still get this match, although the points are quickly moving back and forth, so both of these teams are playing the objective pretty well. Echo's usually a pretty easy point for the Americans to grab, simply because most of the time Russians don't stick around at Echo and just continue on to Delta or Charlie. At this point, I would probably be looking for any points I can try to grab or hold on to, and you could probably only really hope to get 2 different points. Delta might be kind of a hard grab this late in the game, simply because there's going to be so many Russians on there, and the AC-130 is looking at it at all times. Now the enemy knows where you are, and you've shot at him, so you've pretty well pissed him off, so he's coming for you, you know, at this point. Thankfully your teammate manages to take care of him, but you are still spotted. Whenever you're spotted, don't try to take the same route you just took. Game's starting to wind down for the Americans. It looks like the Russians are going to hold on for the V. I'm going to guess that just a little bit more effort from Tankmayvin probably would have helped out this match quite substantially. And it looks like this round is complete. It's not surprising, but when Tankmayvin was in a tank, he did very well. When he was outside, that's when things started to falter a bit on the US team. And I'd like to point out that it was specifically the large blocks of time that Tankmayvin was spending waiting for a tank that the US team suffered the most. While you might be a great asset to the team when you're in a tank, if you're spending half the game waiting for that resource, whatever it may be, you're not doing anything for your team at that time. Otherwise, some very solid play today by Tankmayvin. That's it for this episode of Over Your Shoulder. If you liked this episode, be sure to leave a like before you go. If you're new around here, please consider subscribing. If you'd like to be featured in a future episode of Over Your Shoulder, be sure to leave me a comment with your information, send me a tweet with your Battlelog ID, or a YouTube message. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, YouTube.